Today, I'm going to show you how to remove facial hair in Photoshop. Hey there and welcome to Phlearn. My name is Nace. You can find me at phlearn.com where we make learning fun. In today's video, we're going to show you how to remove facial hair. We're talking about stubble, beards, mustaches, goatee, all of the above. Using these techniques, you're going to be able to remove any amount of facial hair from any person in Photoshop. We're gonna start off by showing you how to paint away that hair using this simple brush tool. Then we're gonna bring in another reference photo that's gonna allow us to add texture and clarity back to the original photo, making it look realistic. Finally, we'll do some finishing touches and help everything blend together. And don't forget, you can download these sample images and follow along at phlearn.com. Just follow the link in the description right down below. So here's our sample image for today, and we're gonna be removing all of this facial hair. Now let's go ahead and create a new layer, and I would say traditionally when I wanna remove small objects, I'll usually grab my spot healing brush tool right here. Now that's really good for removing things like this, like paint over it and it's gone. Maybe one little hair, two little hair, things like that, and you can see it works really well. But when I bring this tool right here and I try to just say, hey, remove all that facial hair, it doesn't exactly know what to put in its place. It starts to get a little bit confused, and as you can see, it's not exactly giving us the result that it wants. That's why all of these automatic tools won't really work for this process, because there's so much that we want to remove. So we want to use a much more manual method, and that's actually using the brush tool, believe it or not. The only thing with the brush tool, there's a small downside here, and that's if you just paint over top of your subject, you're not going to have any texture at all. So a lot of people kind of shy away from the brush tool and thinking that it's going to look fake, but here's the deal. After we go ahead and paint on a new face for this guy using the brush tool, we can then add texture over top of that, helping it look realistic. And we're going to show you how to do that. So we're going to start off with our brush tool. So let's go ahead and hit B for the brush tool. We're just going to right click and make sure our hardness is set to 0. Okay. And then we're just going to change our brush size where we need it. So my keyboard shortcut to help you guys out here is holding Control and Option, and then click and drag to make your brush larger and smaller. Okay, if you guys are on a PC, it's gonna be Control, Alt, right click and drag. There we go. So what we wanna do here is basically using our brush tool, I'm gonna use a flow of about 20%. So you're gonna hit Shift 2 to bring my flow up to 20% here. I'm gonna hold Alt or Option to sample some of the colors in my subject's face. Now, before I start doing any painting, let's go ahead and take a look at this. So if I sample this color here, I'm just gonna paint it right over here. We can see what that is. Sample this color, paint it over here. Sample this color, paint it over here. Okay, I'm just sampling different parts of this person's face, and you can see they're all pretty different colors. It has to do with the way the light is interacting with it. Some of it's reflecting some of the blue background. All of those different colors are still our subject's skin. So when we do this, we want to make sure we're continuously sampling our subject's skin, and that's going to help these end results look a lot more realistic. All right, so we don't need those swatches. Let's go ahead and get rid of them. I just wanted to show you that, it's important to continue sampling because skin color changes pretty vastly across a person's face, and especially with highlight and shadow. Okay, so what we're gonna do is hit the B for the brush tool. I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and sample our subject's skin, and then just start painting over it. And again, I'm using a flow of about 20%, okay? So you can just hit Shift 2 on your keyboard to get to 20% flow. There we go. Now, if you guys are using a mouse or a trackpad, I would recommend using a lower flow, somewhere between 5 and 10%. There we go. And here you can see I'm just sampling and painting right over top of our subject's skin. And I know this is like kind of looks crazy. It's like, really? I got to hand paint this person's face? This is the best way that I've found to do it because we don't really have information of what this person's face looks like under their hair, right? It's like, this is all we got. I can grab the color here and paint it in there, but I don't really have anything for like my clone stamp tool or my spot healing brush tool. I don't have anything for those tools to sample. So grabbing just skin color is the best way that I've found to do this. There we go. And you can see we're just going to continue to blend it together and blend it together. Now we'll do a few different passes. I know that doesn't look exactly realistic just yet. I want to get most of this kind of roughed in to start with. Okay, so we just want to remove most of the facial hair to start with. There we go. And then we're going to kind of come in and smooth it and do any highlight and shadow and things like that we need to do to help everything look a little bit more realistic. There we go. Okay, looking pretty good. And we can see, yep, basically we're just painting a new face on the bottom of this person. So I will say, while I'm doing this is kind of an advanced technique. I think anyone could do it, but I would recommend, if you haven't done any sort of painting in Photoshop like this before, just take your time with it, and don't forget, I'm on a new layer. I can turn this off and on at any time. So if it gets to a point and I'm like, man, I don't really like how that's looking, or it doesn't look too realistic, you can do a bunch of things. You can erase part of your layer. Like if you like the left side but not the right side, you just erase the right side and then start over again. You can go ahead and delete your layer and start over again if you need to, and you can always come back here and kind of fix it up a little bit. So don't get discouraged. This is a little bit of an advanced technique. This is going to be relatively difficult, even for me, and I've been using Photoshop for many years now. But you can do it. It's all just in patience and how long you're going to take to get this technique. And there we go. And your attention to detail with the highlight and shadow on a person's face. Because after all, what we're doing is repainting a person's face. Okay. Now I know there's no real texture at this point, and that's totally okay. So don't worry about that. If you're concerned that there's no texture in your image, that's okay. We're going to show you how to add texture in just a little bit. All right, so you can see I'm kind of grabbing highlights and shadows here. I'm still trying to, define a chin for our subject. I don't want him to feel like he doesn't have a chin after we're all done. If possible, look at reference photos of your subject without facial hair to see what their chin looks like, and basically your job is to recreate that, so to repaint a chin. All right, and if it's a little bit unclear, that's totally okay. You can always just get back in there and, try again, paint something in there that you feel looks realistic. All right, there we go. So you can see it's a little bit of a labor of love here. It's not something that we want to rush. There we go. And don't worry if you paint over the lips or anything like that. You can always come back in here and clean it up. All right, so that's looking okay there. Let's just smooth this area out here. Maybe bring it a little bit darker there under the lips. There we go. And again, just working on giving our subject at least a little bit of a, fighting chance for a chin here. It's probably the hardest part. And you can see it's actually looking pretty good. And we don't have any texture at this point. So, that's definitely something that we're missing. But if you zoom out, this is kind of where you want to look at your image. Like, does it look good when you're super zoomed out? And if it does, you got a pretty good chance at it looking really good in the final, because adding texture is actually not that difficult to do. So we're just looking at it super zoomed out, and this is going to allow us to see, like, is this even working? So you can see all that we just painted with the brush tool. Pretty cool, huh? All right, let's go ahead and make a brush nice and small. We're just going to go ahead and paint away right down here as well. Can you believe all this is just with the brush tool? The humble brush tool, always surprising me. Always there when I need you, brush tool. Thank you so much. All right. For my first few years of using Photoshop, I wanted to use tools like the clone stamp tool and the healing brush tool and all these more like automatic kind of fancier tools. But the more I use Photoshop, the more I realized that the brush tool can actually handle so many of these jobs. And the more comfortable I get with the brush tool, the more I feel like I can do just about anything in Photoshop. There we go. Because basically, at this point, we're just painting, So imagine a traditional painter with, a paintbrush and a set of paints. They can paint anything they want. They can paint a person with facial hair or without. So we're kind of doing the same thing. We're just painting we're painting the bottom of a person's face who does not have facial hair. There we go. Now, coincidentally, we actually have a tutorial on how to add facial hair. So if you're here and thinking, oh man, this is cool, but maybe I want to add facial hair, we'll link that tutorial up in the description right down below. That's a really cool technique involving custom brushes. Okay, so very different techniques on how to add facial hair versus how to remove facial hair, but we've got tutorials on both. Fantastic. And we're just going to get most of this away here. Again, basically everything that we've done up until this point has just been with the brush tool. Fantastic. We're looking really good. And again, I'm doing this in real time. I didn't want to speed this up because I wanted to I wanted you to get a real sense of how long this takes and you know, how if I make any mistakes, how I'm kind of fixing those up and things like that. And I kind of just wanted to talk through it. But again, you can see I've just got my flow at 20% here. All right. And again, just holding Alt or Option to sample colors every time I need. You know, I don't want to sample up here and then paint down here because it's not going to look good, right? So I want to sample right near the area that I want to paint and then go ahead and get it painted in. So we're still in stage 1, which is basically just getting rid of the hair and trying not to completely butcher this person's face. There we go. All right, and I say we're looking pretty good. All right, step 1 is about wrapped up. Most of this hair is gone. We don't have any texture on this person's face, so it doesn't look realistic at all, but it will in just a little bit. Now we're moving into step 2, which is adding a little bit of anatomy back to our subject. So let's go ahead and create a new layer here, and let's just turn this off and on to kind of get a good idea. Okay, so we're just gonna do a little drawing here to show you, you know, this is the lighter area of this person's face. In fact, you know what I can do? I can just clone stamp this. So I can just clone stamp this right over here. Let's just sample current and below. This isn't entirely necessary for this technique. I just want to have a little bit of a reference of what this person's face looked like before I painted on it. Okay, so I'm just like putting it over there, basically. There we go. So now, when I want to paint this person's chin on, things like that, I can do so. And I can even sample colors from down here. All right, so we're just going to make this a little bit darker here. There we go. It's probably a little bit too dark, so I'm going to kind of sample a color right in between those. There we go. And kind of paint that down there. All right, and then we have a lighter color here. This is basically just me trying to recreate their the anatomy of their face. And if you're, you know, you can do this when working on step 1, but I find for me it's kind of helpful to have a little bit of there we go, a whole nother step just to try to like get this right. And I find it's also pretty helpful to be zoomed out here. All right. Keep in mind what we're doing here is painting a person's face. That's really what we're doing. We're painting the bottom half of a person's face. So this is not something that's super easy. So if you're having a little bit of a hard time and, you know, it's just not looking exactly right, you know, you're trying to do something relatively difficult here. So, you know, don't be so hard. It's okay. We have a lot of time on our hands. We can just, you know, try it until it looks good and looks good and looks good. There we go. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect. No one's perfect. Nothing's perfect. There we go. Perfect. I just said perfect, even though before I was saying no, nothing's perfect. Looking good. Okay, so here we just kind of like helped out the anatomy a little bit, some facial structure with our subject. It's not exactly, you know, the way it was before, but it's looking pretty good. And honestly, I think, there we go. There we go. I think we're ready to go ahead and start moving on to the next step. You can always come back here and make adjustments if you need to. But once we start adding some texture onto our subject, a lot of these issues are going to go ahead and just take care of themselves. All right, so let's grab a lighter color down there. There we go, and kind of work out our subject's chin a little bit more. I need a chin, Aaron. Come on, you can do it. Just paint a chin on there. All right, there we go. There's our chin. Okay. Not the most perfect chin I've ever painted, but I think it's totally okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've done so far. I'm going to just group those layers together, and we're just going to turn them off and on. Now, again, if this was just like super far away, you don't even need to do anything as far as texture is concerned, right? Because you can't even see texture when it's really, really small. So this is kind of like your hint. Like this is your idea to know, is this working or not? Zoom it way far away. You're going to hit Control or Command minus a couple times to do that. And then just turn this off and on. And is it working? Does this actually work? Okay, don't think about texture at all. Just like, does it look like someone's face with and without facial hair? And if it does, you're off to a good start. So now comes the next step of the process, and this is adding texture back over top of the face. Now, we could take some texture from this subject's face, but I want texture from the bottom of a face, right? Like this texture here is much different from texture up here. So what we're actually going to do is use another photograph, and I'm going to show you how to pull the texture out of that photograph. So what I would recommend is just going to a free stock image website like Pexels, P-E-X-E-L-S, or unsplash.com, and then just try to find someone with a similar face shape would be great, similar lighting, and similar skin color. Okay, there's so many photos out there. Should be relatively easy to find something like this. And I'm gonna go ahead and pull in our next sample image. Similar lighting, similar-ish face shape, and you can see different age ranges. It's not the same person at all, but that's totally okay. We can use the texture from this person's face on this person's face. I know, you're like, what? We can do that. So let's grab our marquee tool, M for the marquee tool. There we go. And I'm just going to make a selection and then use my move tool to just drag this selection from one image to another. There we go. And hit F for full screen. Fantastic. And now what I want to do is just kind of line these two faces up as best as I possibly can. So let's go ahead and lower the opacity to see what we're doing here. Okay. We're going to hit Control or Command T. This just needs to get rotated a little bit. There we go. Maybe shrink this down a little bit. There we go. Mostly I'm going to focus right around the mouth here. Okay. And there we go. We're just getting a little bit larger here. Now everyone's face is a little bit different. So I'm not necessarily trying to get this perfect, but as close as I can get it, there we go, the better. And that's looking pretty good, especially around the mouth. The mouth is kind of like the hard part here. Okay, so I don't mind if other places aren't aligned. We're gonna focus on the mouth. So let's go ahead and bring this opacity all the way back up to 100. And don't worry, we can make changes to this at any time if we want to. Basically, I need a way to extract the texture from this person's face and then put it on the other person's face. So what we're gonna do is start by desaturating this image. So I'm gonna go to Image, down to Adjustments, and then we're gonna go down to Desaturate, because I don't want any of the color, I just want the texture. Okay, so now that I've desaturated it, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and right click here, and I'm gonna go to Convert to Smart Object. So it's a smart object now, and we're gonna change our blend mode from normal down to overlay. Okay, now I know it doesn't look right just yet. We've got one more filter that we're gonna add to this. So we're gonna go to Filter, we're gonna go to Other, and we're gonna go to High Pass. There we go. Now a high pass filter allows us to extract texture from an image. And you can see I can have control over how much texture I actually extract from one image to another. And we just wanna use our slider here to get it into a relatively realistic place. All right, and you can see somewhere around there actually looks pretty good. Let's just go with 8 pixels here if you guys are following along. Perfect. Okay, so here we can see, let's just turn this off and on. This is the person's face from the second sample image, okay? So I'm using, there we go, and you can see all this little stubble and things like that. That's gonna help it look a lot more realistic, right? I think this is looking really, really good. We just have a couple things that I wanna like warp and move around and things like that. Okay, now the reason I made this a smart object is to allow us to change our high pass filter at any time, but once you get it to the place where you're happy with, you can go ahead and just rasterize this whole layer. So we're gonna right click on here, I'm gonna go to rasterize layer, and now we just have a regular layer. Okay, again, I can still put this back to a normal blending mode if we want, that's what we got. Let's go back to overlay. Now I got a couple things I need to take care of here. One, I've got some of the like lines and creases and things like that. These people are of different ages and they have different facial structures. So we want to get rid of some things like this. Okay, so let's hit S for the clone stamp tool. There we go. S for the clone stamp tool. And now our layer, we're going to sample. Make sure it says current layer. Do not use current and below right here in the sample, or it's going to mess everything up. So current layer, and I'm just going to sample right there. And then we're just gonna paint right over top of any type of like little crease or wrinkle or things like that that we don't want in the final, okay? There we go. And we're gonna see that doesn't take too long. So now let's go ahead and start warping this a little bit more. Hit Control-Command-T, we're gonna right click and go down to warp, okay? Let's right click again. I'm gonna go to split warp horizontally and we'll just do right where the mouth is. And then we'll do split warp vertically and we'll just put a point right there. Split warp vertically, put a point on that side of the face, and we'll do the same on this side of the face. Okay, and then let's put one on the bottom of the jaw there. Fantastic. So now I can start to simply pull this texture around. You can see I split my warp and I can decide where the texture of this second face should be, and I can start aligning it a little bit better with the original face. There we go. Just gonna pull that down there. All right, and we can see already this is starting to look pretty good. All right, let me just right click again. We'll split warp horizontally here, and I'm gonna see about pulling this up just a little bit. Split warp vertically there, and pull that up to there. So we're basically borrowing the texture from one person's face and applying it onto another person. Hit that little checkbox up there, and you can see we're looking pretty good already. So now we've got a lot of extra stuff that we don't need. So what we're gonna do is just put a black layer mask on this overlay texture layer, and that's gonna hide everything. So let's hold Alt or Option and click on that layer mask. Makes a completely black layer mask, and now we're just gonna paint white on the layer mask, and look at this. We're painting this back in. So this is kind of like the secret to all of this, because all of this texture that I'm painting in right now, this is specific to a face, okay? And even more so, it's specific to a face that has the capability of growing hair. You can see like the little stubble here on the bottom of the face. I'm not gonna try to paint that in with a brush tool. That, you know, that would just be an exercise in frustration for me personally, but I can just borrow it from someone else's face and simply paint it right in. Okay, so what this allows me to do is have this whole group down here where I just painted with a brush tool, and then above it I can add texture back on to that face. And you can see it looks great. Like, it looks like we have stubble above the person's lip. We have below the person's lip. All of this detail is looking really, really good. Now, we got a little bit of cleanup I want to do, so let's go ahead and create a new layer on top of that. And now it's time for our healing brush tool. Okay, so right up here, you're going to see your healing brush tool. We don't want to use the spot healing brush tool, just the regular healing brush tool. That allows me to sample. So now I'm going to actually sample from, in our sample right up here where it says sample, make sure this is set to current and below. So now I want to actually sample my subject's skin, and we're gonna start painting this back over top of everything else that we borrowed. Okay, not in entirety, but I wanna get at least some of the original subject's skin texture in there, just in case there's not a perfect match. And I'm just gonna work on removing some of this like extra little stubble and things like that that I don't think we necessarily need right there. Fantastic. So you can see I'm basically using small swatches of this person's skin to kind of fill in other areas, but most of the effect is actually happening with the second person's skin and taking their texture and putting it over top of everything that we've painted. Now, this is a cool technique because I could still go in here and change these settings underneath. I can change my brush and the texture would look great back over top. So I'm just gonna go in here, grab our clone stamp tool, kind of just, you know, do a little bit of cleanup here. Make sure I'm gonna just sample this back to current and below. There we are. We are almost done. This is such a cool marriage of a few different powerful techniques in Photoshop. So not only, are we learning how to actually, paint with the brush tool in Photoshop, but we're learning how to take texture from one photograph and apply it to another photograph to get our final result. And I think this looks pretty dang good. Keep in mind I'm doing this, live as we're talking. You'll want to spend as much time as you feel is necessary to get your final result, but let's go ahead and group these together. By the way, we're providing this PSD, so if you like everything that we've done here and you want to kind of take it apart layer by layer and just get a really good sense of how all this is structured and kind of play with it yourself, you can download this PSD for free on Phlearn.com, as well as the sample images. So you really have a lot of work that you can do to kind of like get this technique really comfortable for you. So let's go ahead and show you our before and after. Here's our before and the after. Before and the after. And that's how we completely repaint a person's face, removing all traces of facial hair in Photoshop. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you want to learn more from us, go ahead and click on that subscribe button and click on the little bell, ding, ding, ding. We send out free tutorials every single week. And if you really want a deep dive into Photoshop, retouching, and compositing special effects, it's time to check out Phlearn Pro, and we have a discount for you in the link right down below. Thank you so much. I'll Phlearn you later. Bye, everyone.